Hello, I'm Dr. Ruth Roberts, your pet's ally. I apologize, we were in a low cell signal and the recording kept dropping, so I'm going to just go through the information I have for you today and then post this later so you'll have access to the whole thing. So what I'm talking about today are pet food recalls and why are we having so many of them. So the most recent one this year, and we actually haven't had that many this year, was when Hill's Food had a premix, a vitamin premix, that was contaminated with an excess amount of vitamin D, which was creating all sorts of problems for dogs and cats eating this food in terms of affecting kidney disease, kidney function, I should say, and several other issues, because with too much vitamin D, you end up developing too much calcium in your system. So the first Hill's recall started in January, and yet it took until the end of March for 33 of their different labeled products to be recalled, and noted that they are indeed contaminated with this vitamin premix, even though they, in their manufacturing records, they would have clear information about which batches received this premix. So why did it take 2 months? And the FDA kept requesting that they test the other brands, and it just took quite some time. So I'll circle back around to that in a second. But why are there so many recalls? And so the reason is that the FSMA, the Food Safety and Modernization Act, passed in 2011, has resulted in more stringent standards for pet food than in human food. For instance, the FDA has zero tolerance for salmonella in pet food. And the reason is that they know you're sticking your hand in to the bag of food that's got that plastic scoop that's been used for bag after bag after bag, dipping it full of food, putting it in your pet's food bowl, and then putting the plastic scoop back in the bag and then going on about your business. Now, if that pet food is contaminated with salmonella, you've just picked up salmonella on your hands, and probably you're gonna do this, rub your face, and you're likely to get salmonella into your system and potentially get sick. In fact, the FDA many years ago started warning pet owners to wash their hands after feeding their pets because of this issue. So, as I said, they have zero tolerance for salmonella in pet food. And so last year they targeted raw diets, so raw, the freeze-dried stuff, the treats, and there were over 40 different recalls, and all of them were indeed raw foods. So what they say on the FDA website and several of the pet food manufacturing websites is that most of these recalls happen before anyone or any pets get sick, because the FMSA has required more testing. So many are voluntary recalls by the manufacturer. And I said it backwards just now, but the FSMA also has granted the FDA power to recall a food. Previously, it had to wait for the company to make a voluntary recall. So, I'm sure that they were, Hill's was battling back and forth with the FDA, and that's why it took time to get all these foods recalled. But this year, there have been only 5 pet food recalls so far, and Hill's accounts for 3 out of the 5. Now, in general, every year, there's 25 pet foods that are recalled versus 100 or more for human foods. So this year, so far, there have been 120 recalls of human and animal foods and drugs. And losartan, which is a blood pressure medication used for people, was contaminated with a potential carcinogen. And that took 4 or 5 months for it all to come out, which losartans were contaminated, and many of them were generics that are not produced in this country. So it's getting a little scary out there. So on the human side, and this is sort of the more I dug, the worse it got, on the human side, salmonella and E. coli are not considered adulterants in human food. And so contamination does not force a recall. in previous episodes of food poisoning, like chicken from Foster Farms in 2013, there were something like 2,500 people that got sick. In 1994, Jack in the Box had a recall for E. coli contamination of their beef, and then that sickened something like 600 people and killed 4 children. I think Jack in the Box was a little bit quicker to respond, but Foster Farms basically said, it's raw poultry, of course it's got bacteria in it, deal with it. And the USDA, the FDA were absolutely powerless to force them to stop selling the chicken or to pick up the products that were contaminated. The other major issue is meat inspection. Currently, chickens are inspected at the rate of 140 per minute, but the Trump administration has increased this to 175 per minute. Really? That's 144,700 birds per day per inspector, which is absolutely ludicrous. Now, what about cattle and pigs? So there are 390 cattle that are allowed to be inspected per hour and 964 hogs per hour. So, I mean, the meat inspectors are saying this is ridiculous. There's no way we can do our jobs. They're only allowed to pull a certain number of animals per hour off of the production lines, even though they may see more issues. So then the next question, I mean, that's just horrifying, right? So the next question I had is, all right, so what happens to all this food when a recall does happen? And this is probably part of where the contamination issues for pet food come in. Much of the human products are turned into either pet food or fertilizer, right? So what's the difference? Pet food, fertilizer? I mean, that's crazy in and of itself. And if it's a bacterial contamination, meat can be cooked to a temperature, a certain temperature, and be considered safe. And then it gets sold into a secondary market that makes processed meats. So things like bologna, hot dogs, Spam, all of those things that we're never quite sure what they are when we open the can or the package. So that's nuts. So how well do recalls actually work? The manufacturer puts the word out. How much of those products do they actually get back? And they sadly only get 36 to 38% of the affected products recovered. And most likely what's happened is that the vast majority of the other stuff has already been consumed. Now, here's the question I couldn't find an answer to. How many reports to the FDA does it take to start an investigation into a possible safety issue? Theoretically, it's 1, but I don't know that for sure, and it's been difficult to kind of get the answers to these questions. So, sorry for the bumpy ride. Pep's trying to figure out where he should be in the car. So, I'd love to hear your comments on this topic, but this is part of why it's so difficult to, deal with pet food recalls, because often there's been a big number of pets that have already gotten sick before anyone has taken action. And while the FDA does actually have more power over the pet food companies than the USDA or which provides the inspecting agents for the meat production, things of that nature, it's still really tough to get things done quickly. So I will put a link in the comments below to the FDA recall alert thing. And this is the other issue too, is how do you let people know that there are recalls going on? And it's difficult. I mean, unless it's really big news, you're not going to know about it until it's, practically all of those, that food has been recalled, or the medication, maybe you've been taking it for a month before it actually gets recalled. So I'll put that link down there for you. Sign up. You can get on the recall list. You will receive a horrifying number of emails into your email box every week, letting you know about pet food, human food, and medications. And just kind of, take it with a grain of salt. Shop the outer edges of the stores. Most of the recalls on the human side involve pre-cooked foods. So for instance, some years ago there was a diced onion recall one week, and the next week Trader Joe's butternut squash soup and Whole Foods butternut squash soup and several others were being recalled because they contained the diced onions. Now, Trader Joe's and Whole Foods is kind of similar, but Kroger isn't. But yet they all had butternut squash soup recalls, so that means that they're all being made in the same kitchen with probably the same ingredients. Yeah. Okay, that's what I have for you this week. Many thanks. Take good care, and until next week, remember, your pet's best health starts in the bowl when you make it. And I'm Dr. Ruth Roberts, your pet's ally. Thank you.